The story begins in America, precisely at the Silver Spring National Weather Department. There are several people who are predicting the path of Hurricane Temi to hit the Alabama and Florida regions. From a weather expert named Will Rutledge, the director of the weather department named Frobisher received information that this upcoming storm was very large, more than any other storm. But instead of taking Will's word for it and calling in the National Guard, Niles Frobisher didn't believe Will's word. At the same time, a local police chief named Dixon warned his citizens to evacuate before the storm came. Dixon did this so that there would be no more casualties, like Hurricane Andrew that had previously devastated the city. While others were busy evacuating, at the Treasury Department's Gulfport facility, a female employee named Casey Corbin and her friend Connor Perkins were preoccupied with old money that had not yet been destroyed. Knowing that their shredder was broken, Casey quickly put the old money, which she had just brought in, into a safe. Soon after Casey counted and checked all the money in the place, which was worth $600 million, Casey gave the results of her report to the person in charge there, as well as his friend named Randy Moreno. And because they were getting more and more money, Moreno ordered two experts named Shasha Van Dietrich and also Freers to immediately repair their money shredder before the storm came. Casey, who had a bad feeling, immediately contacted her boss named Morris, asking to change the safe code. Hearing this, without thinking, Morris agreed to Casey's request. Casey also then approached Moreno in his room, who was busy and under pressure because he was always scolded by Morris. In the middle of their conversation, suddenly the backup generator there had a problem, and Moreno immediately told Casey to fetch a technician because their telephone and internet connections were down. A few hours later, Will, who remembered his brother, visited his brother's residence named Breeze. On that occasion, Will said that they had to leave immediately before the storm came. Back at the finance department of the Gulfport facility, several people were seen forcing their way into the department. Those people turned out to be a group of criminals who were also desperate to immobilize the guards. Hearing the distress signal from the guards, Moreno immediately told Sasha and Freers to stay calm. It was clear that the skills of the criminals were great. They could easily take down the rest of guards. When the criminals could blow up the door, surprisingly Connor, Sasha, and also Freers turned out to be part of the criminals. Moreno, who couldn't do much, was no choice to comply with their request. On the other hand, Will and Breeze are trying to cover the windows in their residence. Meanwhile, Casey, who had just arrived, asked Breeze to help him fix the generator in his office. Without caring about Will, who was working alone, Breeze agreed to help Casey. At the same time, Moreno was brought to the front of the safe to watch Sasha and also Freers, who could open the safe. But since the safe had password just changed by Morris, Freers and Sasha failed to perform the act, and learned that only Casey could currently open the safe. Connor, fearing a storm is coming, forces Moreno to tell him where Casey is. Long story short, Casey, who had just arrived at the gate, immediately checked the situation around the post, because she didn't see any of the guards there. When Casey wanted to return to the car and approach Breeze, Casey suddenly got a shot from the criminals. Luckily, before Casey was shot, Breeze was able to help him. But Sasha, who saw the incident, immediately activated the barrier fence. As a result, for Casey's safety, Breeze was willing to be arrested by the criminals. Then, the criminals brought Breeze to Moreno and Connor. After confirming that Breeze was the one who could fix the generator, Connor immediately told Breeze to fix the generator immediately. Seeing Casey, who was struggling against the criminals, Will, who had just finished with his work, immediately helped. And while in the car, Casey told him the truth what was going on at the moment. Knowing that Breeze was caught, Will, who could no longer contact help through the satellite in the car because it was broken, immediately took Casey to the nearest police station. It didn't take long. They finally arrived at the police station and were welcomed by Dixon. Knowing that the two of them were in very big trouble, Dixon told Will and Casey to enter his room. Unexpectedly, after explaining about the perpetrators, Dixon was unexpectedly part of the robbers too. Luckily, before anything bad happened, Casey and also Will were able to provide resistance and immediately went to escape. Not wanting his targets to escape too far, with the help of Connor's men, Dixon immediately chased Casey and Will. There was a very fierce shootout between them. In the pouring rain, Casey was able to overwhelm Dixon. At one point, because their bullets had completely run out, Will recklessly told Casey to put on the seatbelt until later the car they were riding in was repeated. Before leaving, Casey got out of the car, then took Dixon's weaponry while taking their radio communications. After confirming that Dixon and one of Connor's men were incapacitated, Casey and Will drove away. On the way, Casey realized that the hackers, Sasha and Frears, could connect to the internet, even though the network system there was cut off. With the help of the tools in the car, Will immediately looked for a transmitter or network tower that was still active to thwart them. Realizing that Dixon had failed and was now in a state of chaos, Connor, accompanied by several of his men, immediately picked them up. At the same time, after searching the city, Will and Casey finally found an active tower. Before the action, Will told Casey to stay in the car to control the crane, while he would hook the wire to the tower. In the midst of the thrilling action, Will almost fell because of an object that was swept away by the storm. Luckily, with strong determination, Will was able to control the situation and climb back up the tower. But just as the tower was about to be pulled down, Connor, Dixon, and some of his men arrived and went on the offensive. Finally, after much effort, they were able to take down the tower, as well as thwart the mission of the criminals who were trying to hack the vault password. Knowing they could stop Sasha and Frears, Connor and his men immediately opened fire on Casey and Will. However, with their considerable abilities, Casey and Will were able to escape. On the other hand, unexpectedly, Breeze sneaked into the basement room to free the locked guards. Unfortunately, Breeze's actions were seen by Frears, who immediately activated the electric fence. Meanwhile, outside, it seems that the storm is slowly getting bigger, and the local corrupt police are starting to arrive. Connor, who has just arrived at the department building, expresses his disappointment over the sum of his men's death. In the middle of the conversation, Dixon and the corrupt police surprisingly betray Connor. It turned out that Dixon had long devised a plan, so that he and the police there could get a lot of money, while arresting Connor. And Connor knew about it. He was immediately angry, then immediately shot Dixon. In that precarious situation, one of Dixon's frightened men offered a deal and wanted to work with Connor. Because of Dixon's radio communication, Casey contacted Connor to offer a deal. On that occasion, Casey said that she wanted Connor to release all the hostages, in exchange for which she would be willing to help him. Hearing this, of course, Connor refused Casey's request and replied that Casey was only allowed to choose 2 of the hostages. For this reason, Casey told Connor to take Breeze and also Moreno to a mall as exchange with her. After making sure Breeze and Moreno were still alive, without Connor's knowledge, Casey and Will made a plan. It was clear that they were both wearing special suits that were connected to a rope. Not long after, when the corrupt police arrived at the scene with Breeze, a storm surprisingly broke out and made them bounce. Casey and Will were finally able to get the corrupt cops, who were swept away by Temmie's storm. Seeing that Breeze could escape safely, Will and Casey immediately entered the warehouse to rest first. During the break, Will explained that soon, before the storm ended, they would have to go through the eye of the storm. Although it looks bright and warm, the eye of the storm itself can become a wall of eyes around the ring of the storm, like an atomic bomb. For this reason, Casey and Will immediately went to look for explosives to stop the criminals. Long story short, when Will and Casey had just finished collecting explosives, they were both approached by Connor's men who wanted to arrest Casey. Luckily, Casey and Will immediately hid, making it difficult for the criminals. In the midst of the tense situation, suddenly the tide came in and washed them all away. On that occasion, Casey and Will were separated as they tried to save themselves. After struggling quite hard, Will was able to grab a log and board his car, while Casey, who was separated, was unfortunate to be found by the Connor. Not long after the departure of the criminals by boat, Breeze searched around the place. Then not long after, he found Will, who was cowering on the car, and saw Will's bad condition. Breeze immediately took him away. While in the department building, Casey was forced by Connor to open the safe immediately. Until she was forced to, Casey brought the tab that she had previously kept. Casey also complied with Connor's request. But after the safe was successfully opened, unexpectedly, Connor broke his promise and shot Moreno instead. Back to Breeze, he gives Will some warm clothes and weapons. It turned out that Breeze was a former American soldier who was very good. Therefore, it was no wonder he brought some complete weaponry equipment. In the middle of their conversation, the sky suddenly brightened, signaling the eye of the storm was coming. Before it was too late, they left immediately to save Casey and stop the criminals. 3 trucks were used by Connor and his men to transport all the money, worth $600 million. Connor was in the front truck, while Casey was in the second truck, and the last truck was driven by Frears, who was making out with Sasha. Knowing that, of course, Breeze immediately sped up his car, telling Will to immediately jump into Frears' car. After successfully jumping with some difficulty, Breeze made up his mind to jump towards Will. Luckily, because of their excellent cooperation, both of them were able to get into Frears' car without anyone noticing. Without wasting any time, Breeze and Will immediately went to the front seat to take out Frears and Sasha. In another truck, Casey unexpectedly fought with one of Connor's men, Clement Rice, but let's call him Connor's man. In the middle of their fight, Will is now secretly on the truck. They feel Casey is in danger. After taking down the driver, Will quickly got into the truck. Seeing that Connor's man was very stubborn and unyielding to kill Casey, then Will gave Casey the signal to turn the situation around. As a result, with great cooperation, they were able to kill the Connor's man. Realizing that his 2 trucks had been hijacked by Will's group, Connor immediately took a shotgun to shoot Breeze. Fortunately, when Breeze was cornered, Will and Casey came to help. Because the eye of the storm was getting closer, Will and Breeze made a sudden plan to stop Connor. The 2 of them immediately flanked the truck that Connor was riding in so that he would slow down. As a result, when Connor tried to pass them, Will and Breeze blocked Connor's path, leaving him behind and hit by the eye of the storm. Unexpectedly, as the eye wall got closer to them, Breeze's truck suddenly broke down. For this reason, Casey and Will tried to save Breeze. After surviving, the eye of the storm surprisingly hit the car that Frears and Sasha were driving in. Sometime later, after the storm subsided, Breeze, Will, and Casey could finally enjoy the ride. On that occasion, Casey told them that the truck they were currently driving contained $200 million. Knowing this, Breeze, Casey, and Will considered the $200 million they were currently carrying as a gift for them. Together with their successful escape from the storm and from the criminals, the movie ended.